lots of frame experience, so she's stepping in for Pam today, who's not feeling well. So,
Yeah, I'm
thank
sorry
you.
to hear that about Pam. I know what it's like to have a bad back. To me, I want people to be able to afford my art. Art is expensive to make. Art is expensive to prepare to sale. Art is expensive, and you have to pass those expenses on to the people who buy it. And if you want people to buy your art for a couple of reasons, you want them to come back and buy again, you know, it's going to be hard if your sale is like $500 plus $600 if you've got $300 in your framework and whatnot. So a few years ago, I decided that I was going to check out garage sales, thrift shops, Goodwill, whatever, to see if I could find frames that would be in good enough shape or in a kind of a shape that I could refurbish and frame my artwork that way. And what I do when I do sell it, people are aware that they're getting refurbished frames, and I sell my artwork. I says, you are buying my artwork for X amount of dollars. The frame is free. That way they can't say, well, I don't like this, or I'm gonna have to do something else with it. Go ahead, it's free, you can do what you want with it. That really ends the discussion, quite honestly. And if people want the artwork, which I consider my art to be very reasonably priced, because my goal is to get people to have art in their home, original art, art that they can be proud of to hang on their wall, and to continue to get sales, particularly for people who appreciate art, but my gosh, not everyone can afford it. Okay, so that said, I started looking at different options for getting my artwork framed, and one of my biggest mistakes is I would buy frames without this. I have had the experience of at least twice purchasing an absolutely wonderful frame or creating, I should say that, creating two things, creating a piece of artwork on something that there's no frame that will fit it. Or vice versa, buying a frame and you don't have a piece of canvas or whatever, and you have to use a board, you cut down a board to put in it. So the object is to decide what you want and go looking for the frame based on the size of your piece, or find the frame and make sure you've got something that will fit into it. And I learned the hard way. In fact, I spent months looking for a frame for something I did, and when I did find it, I sold the painting in a heartbeat. But I found my frame in Walla Walla, Washington. And it was at a Goodwill. They were having a special, and I picked it up for $2. Took it home, cleaned it up, slapped it on the painting. A few weeks later, I sold it at a place in the Dalles. But just letting you know that it's really difficult when you are buying used frames. You got to marry them up with something, but you got to make sure that you've got the right sizes. Okay, so that said, there are a number of options. Has anybody ever priced having metal frames? Couldn't? Yeah, okay. Was anyone here when I showed my ballerina picture a few weeks ago? Okay. I did not have, I had used a used metal frame that I had cleaned up. I did not have the right size or the right color to go with my ballerina mat. I paid $60 for that mat, okay?
Whoa.
All right, so that was, and I have actually taken these kinds of frames into, let's say, Michael's to get a mat made for it, and they'll go, wow, where'd you have that made? I'm going, I bought it at, for $8, and they just like roll their eyes. So it is expensive.
One of the hardest ones that I've ever found to try and take apart and put back together, because you have those little middle clips that go in there.
Yes, and that's what I'm going to talk about right now. This particular one I bought for $7.99. And if you're lucky on a certain day, they'll say match the color, which is blue on the back, and you get it for 50% off. So this could have easily, if I'd watched my sales, could have ended up paying like $4 for this. But it came with a cardboard back, and it didn't have the clips. Over time, I have managed to collect clips so that if I need extra clips, and that is to slip under and give your work an extra support so that it doesn't flop around in the frame. And one thing about when you put these things in, a lot of places they'll slip them completely under and they disappear. They are definitely supporting your work, but if you had to get that thing out, I have actually broken the glass trying to force that thing out. So when I put these things in, I slip them under. I might have to use a screwdriver to get the one end under first, and then I put the other end, and I only slip it halfway. So that way I can pull it out with a screwdriver, but I don't put them completely under. It's important when you buy these things that...
Can you stand it up so we can see you do the clips?
Do you need a
I will pass
Vanna?
these around.
Do you need a Vanna to hold that for you while you do that?
Oh, I think I'm fine.
Okay.
I'll pass the clip around. And again, oftentimes when you buy used artwork at the thrift shop, those clips come with it. Sometimes there's like 10 on them. It's like, what the heck? So I usually use like about 5, half that amount. And then I will save those others for future projects. But the other thing to kind of remember too is that if it doesn't have a wire on it, but it does have the little gizmo that you can slip the wires through, that's important because what are you going to use? I usually do my own wire. I order it through Amazon because a lot of times this wire is just old and yucky. The other thing is that if you go to Michael's, I have been real sweet to them and asked them if they would sell me a couple of these little gadgets. And they have. At one time they just gave them to me. But because I had bought it without those little slide things on. Again, the mats that go with them. You can take this out. Of course, they have them in there. You got to be careful when you remove the existing artwork because it can damage your mat. But if you're very careful, you can remove the artwork. This frame cost me $6.99 with the mat.
I like the picture.
Oh, I do too. You know, I've actually found originals, and I've gone on eBay and found out they're worth money, and I'll sell.
Oh, wow.
I'll sell the piece. I won't sell the frame. I want the frame, but I will sell the artwork.
How many?
Pardon? So anyway, yeah, there's all sorts of interesting things. And sometimes the frames are kind of scuffed up, but usually I try to pick frames that are not beat up, that they hinge together really well. And this, of course, is for your watercolors, your acrylics, your sketches, anything that requires a protection over it. And of course, I do pastels and some acrylics that are kind of more watercolor based for these particular frames. That said, now we come to wooden frames. I saw Sarah has a piece back there that I would like to just rip off and take it home. She's got, not her artwork, but the frame. You know, I find myself looking at the wrong thing sometimes. The artwork is beautiful, and it fits the frame perfectly. She has a bit of distress going on with that frame, which I really like because, yes?
I want to add, because it relates to this workshop, and since you brought it up. I bought that frame and it had a tiny bit of natural distressing because it had been beat up. And I looked at it and I said, do I want to repaint this frame or do I want to distress it more? And so I chose to distress it more.
Good, yeah. You can do whatever you want. I've actually had some where I've completely painted over. I have some where I've only touched up a little bit. I have some where I have take it apart, soaked it in water, take a toothbrush to it, put it in the oven on low, dry it out, and boy, I'll tell you, they smell funny, you know, after 80 years of, don't want it too hot, you don't want it to work, but you know, if I'm in a hurry, I don't want to sit around for days for this thing to dry out. So I accelerate the process by putting it in the oven. But again, as you can see, you tear off the back, and in the back here, this is like glued here, but it's also glued onto the wood, so sometimes I'll just take and fill my sink full of water and just very gently rest it in there in some hot water so that it soaks this part that's glued on. Then I'll take a knife and I'll scrape that off. The other thing about both, well, this one I forgot to mention, when you put a backing on it, you can buy, this is cardboard, you can buy acid-free foam at Michael's. You can buy mat board that's not cut and cut it down to fit the back. You'd like to have something acid-free, because you don't want to damage your own artwork in the long run. Plus you can sell, and then those are some of the expenses that you can pass on. I mean, $10 or $7 in that kind of a product is not the same as a $300 frame. So I do pass on some of the expenses I have, but primarily I do not charge for the hardware or the frame, because if I can get the frame for less than $10, that's worth it to me. But in this particular situation, I will put my frame in, and when you have to put something on the back of it, there's a couple of things. It depends on whether or not the area for you to set your artwork is deep enough, and how deep it is determines whether you use one of these little clips, which you can buy different depths to hold your artwork down. The other is that any of you remember we had a demonstration here a little while ago, and the woman used actual triangular pieces of wood that she had put in the corners, and it looked so finished. I thought, wow, that's cool. Well, one of the things I have done, I have a drill press, I have a saw, I have all kinds of hard equipment to help me in the process of doing my work. I buy strips of metal, and I can cut them, I can drill holes in them, and I can affix them to the backs of my paintings if I want. Barb, you went away for a minute.
No, you
And
went
so,
away.
Again, depending upon what you have at your disposal, it might be easier to do this. It might be easier to make sure that what you buy, you can do something with. I'm going to tell something really horrible here. I had one where I could not find anything, so I took bamboo skewers, hot glued them around the painting, and it looked really finished, but it held the painting in. But you do what you have to do. But you got to make sure that it does look good, because you want to pass that on to who is ever purchasing it, so they don't think that it's a mess. I mean, let's face it, you want to be able to put your best foot forward when it comes to that. And again, this is something you may not be able to do. And when you get to the backs of these wooden ones, to add something to string your wire on, there are a number of options you can buy through Amazon. Different size D rings, that's not quite a D ring, but they come different sizes. They will hold a certain weight. The same thing with your wire. It'll say holds up to a certain weight on your frame and how much it weighs so that it doesn't fall off the wall. The other here is that I picked this up at a junk shop. There was 2 of them, and they had a price on it of $3. So I got 2 frames for $3, and I have used one already that I refinished. I mean, again, you can use varnish, you can use you could prep it, guess what, you could then add paint over the top of that. You want to make sure that whatever you use, it doesn't come off. And then again, get it ready for the artwork. It's a matter of your personal choice if it's to your benefit to purchase something new, that's okay, but you have to pass that on to your clientele. And again, based on my personal philosophy is I want people to be able to afford art. I want them to be able to afford my art. And to get that, I'm upfront with them about it, and I'm upfront with them why I do it. And that seems to impress them more. I says, I want people to be able to afford to have art on their wall that's not out of Walmart, Kmart, something that they have ordered offline. I want them to be able to afford real art. And this is how I'm able to help you afford real art. So, that said, are there any questions? Yes, sir.
I would just highlight also how many people love to support sustainability. And so the fact of using.
Yes, you know, and
frames-
that's true. And the character you don't get today.
Great way to say it.
Some of these
Yeah.
old frames are just killers. I have just love, like I said, so anymore now, like I said, instead of looking at the artwork, I'm looking at the frames. And the quality, I was telling Sarah, somebody, that I fell in love with a frame. It looked like tool leather, but it was wood, and it was good wood. Oh my God, I bought it. I didn't measure it. I had my husband, we went to the Home Depot, we picked up a good piece of wood, we cut it, and I guess that I painted on wood, which was okay. I mean, people paint on wood all the time, but that was the first time I had, and the reason was because there was no no canvas, no nothing that would fit into that slot. So, but just to let you know that you can circumvent those problems by using wood, but the frame, like I said, was just killer. And I'm glad I did what I did, but it was really just, it was like that other one I was telling you about where I found the frame in Walla Walla, of all places. But those are the risks you take when you go measure.
A little tip, if you don't have all the tools, but you do want to do, like, you have an off-size frame, it's for a minimal cost, or if you catch them at a slow day, the Home Depot guys will cut it to size for you for a pretty minimal cost.
Well, and again, if you need glass for a frame you buy that does it, Home Depot, they will cut cheap glass. I mean, if you want something that's non-glare, that's a whole another thing and a lot more money. But you can do a number of options of making a frame that's partially, like this one doesn't have the clips, but I have the clips, so I know there's not going to be an issue. I have had frames that I've got at home and I have busted the glass and have had to go get new glass, and so there again, I try not to pass that on because that was me that did that. But you also, be careful when you buy them. Make sure that the mat is not stained underneath. Again, I purchased one that didn't have any glass, and I bought it, didn't realize it, that Goodwill had taken their forever, never, ever get off sticker and put it right on the mat. I tried so carefully to dig that thing off, and it left the residue, and there was no saving that there. So as a buyer, beware that there are some hidden damages to your, and if you do have something that is soiled, you can, I have taken chalk pastel, wash your hands real good so you have no oils on your hand, powder your pastels with a knife, and very gently shade your mat. So if you've got a white mat, it's got just a bit of a brown tinge on one corner, you know, play with it. And rather than throw it away, play with it. And
I painted them with acrylics too.
I have done that too. The only thing is you risk is they warp. If the acrylic is moist enough and the mat is not hard enough, it'll start to bubble a little bit, it will warp a little bit. So that's why I kind of stick to the actual chalk pastels and work from there. But I think that the hunt is fun, particularly if you go on vacation. No matter where you go, you're on the lookout for a frame. If I see pictures lined up in somebody's yard in a garage sale, it's like, you know. I head back with my tape measure, and I keep a tape measure in my car. And again, I'm always looking with the idea of something that I'm going to be doing. You have no idea how many frames I have at home. But it's important to be able to show your art as a finished look when you're trying to sell it. Yes, sir.
Just because I'm newer to the framing and stuff, do you ever find big frames, like giant frames?
Yeah.
And do they cost much?
Well, again, at Goodwill, they have some that are just huge.
Yeah.
And if you've got the media or the artwork to go into it, great.
Mm.
Even if you need to cut a piece of wood. You just gotta make sure it's structurally sound, that it will hold up to being mounted and framed, wired, whatever. But yeah, I have, there are some big ones at Goodwill. And some Goodwills are more stocked than others. And we've got like about 3 Goodwills at a close proximity to where I live. So I'll just get in my car and I'll just hit one right after the other sometimes. And particularly joyful when I hit the jackpot with the match the color, then I can walk off with something from $12 down to $6 or something like that, and it's a score.
When to put paper on the background and when not?
On
On
one
the
of
back
the-
of it, I mean.
On the back of these,
Yeah,
Dust covers?
well, I think that you
Watercolor.
need to protect your artwork. Your artwork is set in a mat, and it's raw. It's, sit there with tape on it, and you've used the right kind of tape. You need to put a backing on it. And that backing can consist of an acid-free foam board, or I have actually used mat board, which is the more expensive of the options, but it all depends on how much of a finished look you want. And again, even that does not give you the security of adding the clips to them. And I usually do like 4 clips, yes?
like on watercolors, especially, on a wooden frame. I've used the packaging, the plain brown packaging.
As long as it does not interact with your artwork, because it can cause your artwork to discolor. And you could even purchase paper, tear sheet, vellum paper that is acid-free, and even a sheet of that down before you put cardboard or whatever, as long as you have a barrier, because you want to be able to protect the integrity of your artwork, because it will go south if you don't. So, with that said,